cash by a man at that concert. He told me to go get myself a pack of cigarettes and whatever I wanted on top of that. He said he didn't care what I spent it on, it was for me. Well, I don't do meth, so I bought a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. I got $3 left. I also got a really cool shirt. I want to show you guys this bridge real quick. I'm exhausted. It's a pretty easy jaunt back to the hotel. So I'm going to show you this walk. This is my last night at the hotel. I do need to try to get some stuff done, so I'm going to set my alarms. Instead of going off at 9, they're going to go off at 6 in the morning. Maybe when I get to the room, I might take a shower, and if it's cold, give myself a boost of energy. But let's show the stroll. Oh, come on now. You press the button. There it goes. Alright, so this is a bridge, of course. It's a long way down to the bottom. The green stuff that you see there, that's actually tree branches. There's the tops of the trees up there. The bridge is, well, it's cement, but it kind of looks reminiscent of maybe, 1920s New York, 1910 New York. I'm only saying that based on old photographs, of course. But it appears, although I really took a look at the Mountain Hood area versus the Dalles area, and for the most part, the Dalles is the richy rich area. Now here we got old houses of old money. We got a lot of historic stuff. Here, just like in Hood River, in most, what do you want to call them, liberal cities, they're not really liberal. There's a lot of old stuff like that cast iron fence there, and of course the stone base that it sits on. That's all locally quarried rock. Some of these houses are made out of quarry stone from the local area. The house I'm walking past actually has artificial quarry stone. I've seen real quarry stone of the type that it's trying to mimic. They have them in Nebraska. They're old Nebraska homesteads. They had to carry those bricks from the quarry at one of the houses I was working on in Chapel. They had to carry the stuff from the quarry all the way to Chapel, Nebraska, just north of it, like 18 miles away. And they had to do it one brick at a time by horse and buggy, which is pretty cool to know. It's a full day's ride there and back for one stone. Seeing as big as some of those are, it makes sense why they made it out of those. I believe that they probably brought in more than one. If they're gonna do a thing like that, they're probably gonna do it with a horse team or an oxen team. And we got, of course, I should be pointing this up. We can see, maybe if I pause, we can see the steeple there of St. Peter's. And of course, we got a lot of big, nice, fancy 2-car garages. That's actually got, looks to be a balcony on top of it. And some of these houses actually have signs on them from historical something or other. It's actually pretty well illuminated, but my camera sucks. Maybe if I stop and let it focus a minute, you'll be able to see. Nope, does it no justice. There's a lot of old school houses. The one to the left of me looks about a 1950s build. Oh, and the one right next to it looks like a dollhouse from a magazine. I don't want to go showing all the houses, but I'll show the walk along the way. This fencing here is kind of an old style, and it goes with the quaint Victorian house. He's cute. I shouldn't use the word quaint to describe the house because it's magnificent. It really is. There's a lot of stuff with real fancy woodwork. That type of stonework also right over there. That's pioneered by the Japanese, and they didn't do the greatest job in my opinion, but they did a fine enough job. Now on one end it's stone that was put there, that's over on that part, and over here it's stone that's naturally there. And again, this is doing it absolutely no justice. You can see this rail here, it's pretty old, it's pretty broken up. See right through parts of it. Parts that are just hanging off in the middle of nowhere. Parts where it looks as if a vehicle has gone through it and torn out a massive chunk of the wall. Got some little flat looking stones over here. Looks like they tried to lay all the flat ones along there, and then all the broken up pointy ones are right into this area. It's just a matter of how they set them down in most cases, or how they broke. Different types of stones actually break in different ways. So if you know your stonework, you can actually get some pretty interesting tiles. There's a couple of brothers in Colorado that they do like really nice fancy tables. They do it with like locally quarried marble and slate and a lot of other different stuff, but they're able to break the stone in a way that there isn't a whole lot of finishing work to be done, because after you get it all cleaned up and you get it all polished, you end up putting a special type of glaze over the top of it, and that glaze is supposed to basically solidify into a glass-like finish. And if you have to do a lot of work to the stone to bring it down, it gets difficult because there's going to be different colored stones, and that dust is microfine, and it takes a while to grind the dust down, or to grind the rocks down so that they are flat and planed, and they do have to do every piece by hand. But they make some magnificent tables, and as long as they're able to do a minimalistic amount of work as far as grinding it down, it saves them time, saves them money, saves their customers money, and also you don't get that residue dust in a lot of areas that you don't want it. Now, I was told that the reason that they're so good at not getting that dust stuck in the ceiling is because they do each individual stone and measure them out, each individual stone, to make sure that they're all the proper height before they assemble the table, and it's just basically assembling a puzzle. And that takes some doing, but also if you're doing each individual piece and you just slide them into place, it means that you're not planing them while they're in place. And that means that when you've got the red stones and the blue stones and the green stones and the white stones all next to each other, you're not grinding them down so that each one is picking up dust from the other, and then when you put your glazing over and it solidifies real tough, you're stuck with what can be a really cool effect. It's called sunburst, but not so much on stonework because that's like painting it. And that all comes to an artistic style that come to us from Greece. The ancient Greek statues, they were painted. But when we started unearthing them during the Victorian age, especially, we got to find some pretty cool stuff that's painted. Those beautiful white marble statues, painted. And we tend to like our stone cold, because that's how we saw the statues when they were first unearthed and brought out of the ground. For many of us, the antiques and artifacts from that age that we see on TV, they were put into museums, some of those pieces hundreds of years ago. And some of them have been in private collections for thousands of years. Some of those old Roman statues, they belong to, of course, Roman elite. Every single one of those was in the private collection of a Roman elitist at some point or another, or a Greek elitist. And we have found residue of paint on a few of the Greek artifacts. Some of the Egyptian artifacts, their stuff as we see it today. We see Egyptian stuff as it's brown sandstone. Everything looks brown. The pyramids are brown. The sand is brown. Everything is brown. And we see the Greek stuff and we go, well, everything is gray. Everything looks gray. It must be gray. Well, most of that stuff actually isn't gray. It's a special kind of marble. It's white quartz with black all throughout it. Makes a pretty cool effect. Now we've got them Roman statues. The Romans, they didn't so much like that effect as much as the Greeks did. And the Greeks very much loved the pure white as well. Some of their more grandiose temples are pure white. And that's more the way that the Romans like to build. But they also were quite eclectic, both as far as collecting gods from their conquered foes to adopting weapons and tactics that might be better than their own. And also when it comes to art and architecture, one of the things about the great pantheon of the gods, that's basically all of the gods in the Greek world or the Roman world. Well, the Romans, since they collected the gods of others, that included Egyptian gods, it included Greek gods, it included, even the Hebrew God. That might be strange to you, but the Hebrews, even though their God was considered quote unquote invisible, the thing is that the Romans had conquered it. So whether it was invisible or not, it was their victory. Bonjour. Hello. All right, I'm only about a block from the motel. I'm actually going the wrong way, but that's intentional. There's a big house here I wanted y'all to see. It's a historic house of some sort. Those little plaques are all over the place. Let's get back to the Greek and Roman statues. All right, so we've got two locations, Pompeii and Herculaneum, that were buried by Mount Vesuvius in I want to say 79 AD. I might be incorrect about that. But because of the way that it was buried, Pompeii actually yielded a few statues that still had the paint on them, like visibly still on them, not people having to take a Q-tip that's specially made with super fine microfibers and try to wipe off what's on there and put it through a special machine that basically cooks everything that goes into it. And then they can apparently tell from the enzymes or from the output, or I don't know how the machines work, but apparently they have a whole spectrum of dyes that they've been able to identify in the Greek and Roman world, and that includes both in the clothing as well as in their paints. It's all really cool stuff if you get into it, especially if you like making things. If you've got patience, like let's say you need to get a piece of artwork done by next Tuesday so you can eat. It'll be done by next Tuesday because you want to eat. Now let's say somebody gave you 6 months. You got 6 months to complete that painting. And they give you enough that painting is, well, worthwhile for you to spend 40 hours a week on it. As an artist, you know you're not going to do that. As an artist, you know that you can spend a lot more time than that on that piece of artwork. You also know that you're going to get burned out from it, and you're going to need to take some time off and then go back to it. Anyway, it's a beautiful route. There's one of the courthouses. That's actually the sheriff's department, and I believe the ADA is in there as well. That's Americans with Disabilities Act, or it might be some other acronym. I don't know. There's a few of them, isn't there? Like when you say BLM, sometimes people think Bureau of Land Management. I know that's what goes through my head first. Alright, this here church is pretty cool. Looks like locally quarried stone. Most of it anyway, except for some of the crenellings and there's some cement work, of course, on top of it. And they're doing some renovations of some sort. United Church of Christ. Cool. They got it looks like in between the old church and what looks to be possibly a type of seminary, there's this little courtyard area. That's part of a villa. Basically, I mean that's something that is actually pretty universal in ancient structures worldwide, from China, Japan, Korea, the Congo, Egypt. We've even got examples of villas from the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans. We've got examples from South Africa. We've got some from the Ivory Coast. And of course, we've also got European villas, and those are the ones that y'all are most familiar with. Believe it or not, the Greeks are actually an Asiatic people. They're not exactly European necessarily, although they did have a lot of their conquest across there. Matter of fact, the Greeks were a lot of the motivation for Romans. The southern part of the boot of Italy was all Greek, even during Roman times, and the Romans celebrated the Greeks for their philosophy, for their art, for their architecture, and for their poetry. They were the only people that the Romans saw as equals. Matter of fact, some of them, you might argue that the Romans may have even seen the Greeks as superior, even though they lost in battle. The reason for this is because most of the Roman belief system is actually taken from the Greeks. Although the Gladius Hispaniensis was taken from, well, the Spanish. There were both Spanish Gaul and Spanish Celt. And you can be a Celtish Gaul because one of them is a people who are united by language. Another is well, basically their equivalent of a religious belief. Anyway, the whole point is that the idea that we have of Rome today is not quite it. You might want to think more along the lines of modern Las Vegas. Rome is more of a theme park. I mean, all of these temples are vying for your attention, your money, your power, your resources. See, a temple, when sacrifices were made by the people, the temple itself would require everything that basically the people didn't need. The hide was important for armor. The bones were important. The meat, though, the flesh, the gods didn't want that. So that was distributed to the people. And for the Greeks, that came out to about 2.5 ounces of meat per day per citizen. So sacrificing animals to the gods was actually an important part of their social welfare. It's not enough to sustain you, but you know what? That wasn't the only sacrifices made. And also, well, there's other goods and supplies. That just happens to be part of the free bread line. And you can do that every day. Like I said, it's every single citizen, every single day. The Romans gave out a grain stipend, which is pretty cool. They didn't dish it out for every citizen, though. It was only for free white males. Well, take out the white part, because you didn't have to be white to be a free citizen in Rome. You did not get the grain stipend if you were a slave. You had to be a free male citizen of the Roman Empire. And you would get enough grain every month for 2 people to live on. Anything beyond that you got to earn. But that right there, I mean, you could live in the Roman Empire and be a freeloader the whole time. The Greeks were far less tolerant of that. Rome, they worshipped your wiles. The Greeks look back upon those days and want to say they rested upon their wiles. But that's fantastical nonsense. I mean, if we look at the greatest philosophers of the Greek Empire, look what the Greeks did to them. When people want to tell the story of Jesus, I'm like, you know what, that's pretty much the story of every great Greek philosopher that ever lived. Now, Hypatia, that's a Greek name to look at and remember. That's a woman with power. What happened to her, too? Anyway, I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I'm overwhelmed and exhausted, but I'm flipping trying. 8:30 in the morning, they should have my part in for my car. So I should be able to fix it tomorrow, I hope. Maybe y'all take a little bit of a note from modern Hispanic culture is actually not quite what we Americans might imagine. We like to associate Mexico with being Spanish, but most of the stuff that we associate with Mexico or the Yucatan Peninsula, there's vacation and all that, but we also look at the Aztecs and the Incas and all of that, and those weren't Spanish people. We also get to see how brightly painted much of their things are or were, because some of it still survives today. We didn't destroy them until hundreds of years ago, whereas the Greeks lost their antiquity thousands of years ago. And the Romans, well, depending on which part of the empire you believe in and whether or not you want to consider the Byzantine Empire, or if you want to consider the Byzantine Empire the Eastern Roman Empire, you could say that it lasted up the late 15th or early 16th century. And a lot of that only comes from the Holy Roman Empire, which, oddly enough, is Germany. And if you know anything about the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, in 9 AD, one of the most famous quotes from Augustus Caesar, formerly Octavian, is, Varus, give me back my legions. Alright, good to be rid of you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper, and no victim left behind.